Hi, this is Victoria Bragonier, and I am the Public Policy Director from the Alliance for Progressive Virginia. And today I'm interviewing Senator Donald McEachin, who represents Virginia's 9th District. And I want to say thank you, Senator McEachin, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you for having me.
First off, would you please give a short biography and then talk about your district?
I was born in Nuremberg, Germany. I am married with 3 children. My wife and I met at the University of Virginia School of Law. I graduated undergraduate from American University, and I also hold a Master's of Divinity from the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology at Virginia Union University. The 9th Senate District is part of Hanover, part of Richmond, including the capital, so I have the governor as a constituent, regardless of what party he or she's in.
Oh, boy.
And Eastern Henrico and all of Charles City County.
Okay, wow. And I heard last week it was announced that you are running for Congress. Is that correct?
Yes, indeed. It's the new 4th Congressional District. As your listeners probably know, there was a lawsuit over Bobby Scott's district over the packing of African Americans into one congressional district in an effort to diminish their ability to influence elections in other districts. And so his district was broken up, and the 3rd is a lot smaller than it was geographically. And now there's a new 4th, both of which have African American voting age populations in the 40 percentile range, and both of which, at least on the Democratic Performance Index, perform well.
Okay. Well, congratulations. We wish you much luck.
Thank you.
All right, so before we get, I want to talk to you about some of the legislation that you sponsor, but before we get to that, I'd like to ask you about some of the things that came up on the Senate floor yesterday. One thing was HB 685, and the title is Direct Primary Care Agreements. Could you talk about that bill? You came out in opposition to that bill.
That was an attempt the actual motion was to send the bill back to committee, which I thought needed to be done. It is a bill that essentially tries to say insurance is not insurance when a doctor charges an annual fee for services rendered to patients. The point I made was that is exactly what insurance is, and the fact that it's being offered by a doctor in a particular practice to a particular set of people does not change the character and nature of that. And what the bill attempted to do was get these folks out of the regulatory scheme of the State Corporation Commission, which every other insurance product has to go through. And that's important because we need to make sure the insurance product is appropriate, that it's actually doing what it's supposed to do, and it's not ripping people off. That's part of what the State Corporation Commission ensures. What I found so troubling is my colleague Bill Stanley from the Danville area, from Martinsville, was arguing for the bill. And part of what he was arguing was that this gives more access to care. And if you follow the legislation that he's offered over pretty much the entire time he's been here, he has offered legislation designed to try to attract more physicians and designed to offer more health care to the people in his area. Yet and still he resists Medicaid expansion. Mm-hmm. And so the point I made yesterday was that I didn't quite say it like this, but you're going through a lot of twists and turns to try to provide your folks with access to care when all you have to do is support Medicaid expansion.
Right. Yeah, and we're definitely for Medicaid expansion. Yes.
Yes, we are.
Yes, and I appreciate you fighting for it. Hopefully one day we'll get it here in Virginia.
I'm sure we will.
All right. Well, let's move to the other big topic that was, of course, all over the news, and that had to do with the Virginia Supreme Court nomination. Now, first, before we go into who was nominated and what ended up happening, could you just explain the technicalities of how does somebody get nominated for a position on the Virginia Supreme Court?
Well, the typical process is that the names are offered, and the powers that be will consult with one another. That is, the Senate and the House will consult with one another, and then usually one name will emerge, and that person will be interviewed by both the House Courts of Justice Committee and certified by that committee, and by the Senate Courts of Justice Committee and certified by that committee. And part of the input process has to get this down to one person is you hear from the statewide bar organizations, whether it's the the Women's Bar, the State Bar, the Old Dominion Bar Association. Everybody weighs in. They all have interview processes that they'll interview 4 or 5 or 6 candidates, and based on their input to us, we narrow it down to ultimately one person. That's typically what happens. The way we got in the predicament that we found ourselves in yesterday is that the legislature last year in 2015 did not fill a Supreme Court vacancy.
Okay.
And actually, I take that back. Let me rephrase that. A Supreme Court justice resigned after we left session, and so when that happens, it's the governor's. The governor has the ability to appoint a justice, and in all the years that anybody can remember, that justice is usually confirmed by the Senate, not the Senate, but the Senate and the House when we come back in January. In this particular case, the justice was Justice Jane Roush, and eminently well qualified, actually suggested to the governor by the chair of House Courts, which is Dave Albo, a Republican. And when we came back for our session, actually in August, it was the first session after he made the appointment, the General Assembly declined to endorse her, to approve her.
Okay.
But they couldn't get anybody else approved either, right? And so we left Richmond without an appointment. The governor reappointed her, and that got us to January, or this session, I should say.
Okay. And so what do you make of the fact that Ken Cuccinelli was put up for nomination?
Well, that's just absolutely bizarre, but I think I'm going to answer that question directly in just a moment, but I think what's important for your listeners to understand is that regardless of who it is, it's a slap at the judiciary, because here you have an eminently well-qualified woman who has been said by any number of legal scholars to be a great jurist, being removed from the court for no reason at all other than partisan politics. We have never done that in Virginia before. To my mind, it is a dangerous precedent because we are politicizing the court, and we've got to figure out a better way of selecting our judges than what we've just shown the people of Virginia. Now, the whole Ken Cuccinelli thing was just absolutely bizarre because that's taking the politicizing of the court to a whole nother level. I mean, a person who has ethical challenges, a person who doesn't believe in science when it comes to climate change, a person whose views are already well known on things like the Affordable Care Act and gay LGBTQ rights.
Right.
For him to have taken that position, which I'm glad that did not happen, but for him to even be offered is to put someone on the bench who does not have the appearance of being objective. And if the court doesn't have the appearance of being objective, it can't command the respect of the people.
I understand. So what do you think about the gentleman, Judge Stephen McCullough, that was actually nominated? What do you think of him in that position?
Well, I mean, he's been on the Intermediate Court of Appeals. I'm not necessarily familiar with his body of work because he was brought forward in the Senate, at least, with no notice. There was no interview. We weren't afforded an opportunity to look at a judicial questionnaire, to review his background and his body of work since he's been on the Intermediate Court of Appeals. But again, I think what the people of Virginia need to realize is that, once again, I know I sound like a broken record, but a qualified jurist was removed from the Supreme Court for political reasons, and that's what people ought to be upset about. It doesn't matter who her successor is. Her successor could be my wife. It is still the wrong thing to do, is to take somebody off the judiciary for no reason at all, and that is a bad omen for our judiciary.
And so, do you think that there's any possibility that she could be nominated back into the position?
No, I think it's a closed deal at this point. I mean, I could walk over to the Capitol this morning and find out that the whole situation's changed, but I doubt it.
Okay. So where do you think we should go from here? The legislature should go from here with everything that you just talked about. I mean, it doesn't sound like a good place to be.
We are not in a good place, and and people say what it is the legislature should do is now up to the people. You're going to have another election cycle next year in 2017. There needs to be some political retribution on those members of the General Assembly that are up for re-election. That's the House. And then in 2019, you have the opportunity to influence the Senate. But see, what they're betting on is that by 2017 and 2019, this is going to be forgotten, because everybody moves on with their own kitchen table concerns, which are valid concerns. How am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to raise my children?
Exactly.
Those sorts of things. And they're going to forget this happened. But, I'm hoping that the people of Virginia pay closer attention to what's happening here and will remember this when they go to the polls in November. Because that's the only way you fix the system, is to vote.
Exactly. So what do you think the best way is to keep that in the public eye so that people remember?
I think part of it is that progressive groups need to keep in contact with their memberships and even beyond their memberships, if they have that type of reach, to keep it alive. I think it's going to be incumbent on the 2017 ticket. Certainly we know that Ralph's going to be our gubernatorial nominee and Mark is going to be our Attorney General nominee. We don't know who our Lieutenant Governor nominee is going to be yet, but for the three of them to keep it alive on the campaign trail and just to be repeated time and time and time again.
Okay. All right. Well, the other thing I want to ask you about, and moving on to some of the legislation that you sponsored this session. First up, SB 183, the title is Health Insurance Removes Prohibition on Provision of Abortion Coverage.
Right. Right now, in our marketplace for the Affordable Care Act, there's a prohibition on insurance companies offering insurance for abortions. That in my mind is unnecessary. We can't predict the reasons why a woman may choose to need an abortion, and to not have that covered by insurance is just wrong. Or at least, and it's even worse than that. What we're saying is that insurance companies can't offer it if they want to, right?
Right.
And so that, interfering with the free market process like that is not what we're supposed to be about here at the Virginia General Assembly. And what that bill sought to do is to restore some balance in the marketplace and allow those companies that want to offer that insurance to offer it and at a competitive price, and those families that choose to buy that type of insurance to be able to buy it.
And so that bill failed, correct?
Sadly, yeah, it failed.
Yeah. And so what do you think? Why do you think it failed? What do you think were the major arguments against it?
Well, the argument is that there are state and federal dollars involved, and that that we shouldn't be using state and federal dollars to pay for something that people oppose, or at least a segment of the population opposes, which is abortion. But that's sort of that ignores the fact that people pay for things every day through their taxes that they don't necessarily agree with, right?
Yes.
There are a whole bunch of Democrats that are paying taxes to support this General Assembly right now, and I dare say they don't agree with a darn thing that's happening, but their tax dollars are still going there. There are maybe pacifists in this country who are paying for military activities around the globe that they don't approve of, but their tax dollars are going there. So the notion that we should prohibit tax dollars from going into supporting a marketplace where certain types of insurance coverages are offered is ludicrous, because it happens all the time. None of us have a government that we can agree with right down the line 100%, yet our tax dollars are paying for this stuff anyway.
Yeah, I agree. So do you foresee possibly bringing back the bill maybe next year or another session?
Well, if I'm here next year, which I hope not to be because I'm running for Congress, I will certainly bring it back. I've brought it before and I'll bring it again.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to your other bill, SB 223, New Sentencing Hearing, Abolish of Parole.
That was a bill that I was actually a co-patron on, so I didn't take the absolute lead on it, but and it was a bunch of bills that were sort of mashed together. What we found ourselves faced with was a situation where the court had said in a case that juries had not been properly informed of the abolition of parole, and that could have influenced their sentencing verdicts on a discrete number of people. I can't remember the number of people it was right now, but it wasn't more than maybe 500 people who could have fallen into that category.
Mm-hmm.
And now they are in jail without the possibility of getting out before, now they're in jail having to serve all their time. The thought is if the jury had been informed that the parole had been abolished, the sentencing might have been lessened. And so these bills, not just my bill, but a couple other bills, were designed to afford these folks an opportunity to get a new sentencing with the jury being informed of, or the fact finder being informed of the fact that parole had been abolished, to see if that would affect their sentencing. Ultimately, what happened, not in my bill, but through another vehicle, if I'm remembering correctly, is that we took even a smaller subset of these 500 or so persons. We took a smaller subset and made them eligible for parole,
Mm-hmm.
and they would leave it up to the parole board to decide. So, some incremental progress in that. The actual litigant in the case that we were all talking about had a new trial, and that was not something that the General Assembly decided to do. Instead, like I said, they took this small subset of individuals and made them eligible for parole.
Okay. And that bill didn't pass either, correct?
My bill didn't pass, but the other bill that was sort of a compromise bill of all of our efforts together ended up passing.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great. All right. Well, those are the two bills I wanted to ask you about. Is there any other legislation that you put forward during this session that you would like to talk about that I haven't brought up?
I think you brought out really two important bills that we put a lot of work into. We're proud of our entire legislative agenda, but I think you hit two of the highlights.
Okay, great. All right, well, I have one last question. I've heard that you are a Star Trek fan. Is that correct?
Guilty as charged, and I like them all. Doesn't matter which version. We're talking old Star Trek. We're talking Next Generation. We're talking Enterprise. We're talking Voyager. We're talking Deep Space Nine, even though that was a space station that didn't go anywhere. It doesn't matter. I am a Star Trek nut. In fact, each one of my campaign managers has always left me with some Star Trek memorabilia piece. My favorite is, and I don't know if your listeners are old enough to remember this, but when I was growing up, you had actual lunch boxes that were made of metal.
Uh-huh.
And imprinted on those lunch boxes were all sorts of, characters, whether they were cartoon characters, superheroes, or whatever, right? Well, someone found an not old because it looks like it's brand new, a Star Trek lunchbox and gave that to me. So,
oh, wow.
I am a Trekkie.
Well, that's good to know. So am I. I really enjoy it. And I'm just like you. I like all the different shows and just the whole thing. I just really enjoy it. But you say you like all of them. Do you have a particular character that you like? Like, I know some people only like Jean-Luc Picard or only like Captain Kirk.
Well, Jean-Luc Picard is my favorite captain. Okay, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big Mr. Spock fan. I am a big Worf fan.
Mm-hmm.
I love Data. I even love the new Mr. Spock, right? In the reboot. I think he's doing a great job of sort of continuing the legacy. So, and that's not to say I don't like the other characters, because like you, we're Trekkies. We love every bit of it.
Exactly.
It's like asking us to choose who are our favorite children, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, you can't do it.
All right. Well, that's all I have today. And I just want to say thank you again for taking the time to speak with me. And I wish you much luck on your congressional run.
Thank you. Live long and prosper.
Same to you. Thank you.